I'm Annette Tonti, and I'm the Managing Director of RIHub, and we're very excited to present to you this year's Rhode Island Startup Weekend. And for those of you that were a part of the Rhode Island Coalition of Entrepreneurs, in May of 2019, we actually held the very first annual Startup Day. We are part of the Global Entrepreneurs Network, and turns out this week is Global Entrepreneurs Week. So we selected this week to start our wonderful event. We are kicking off today with some amazing folks that we're going to talk about esports. We're going to talk about Willie's Super Brew, one of my favorite drinks. And we're also going to be watching Twitch while we can donate live to the Rhode Island Community Food Bank, which is really exciting. So before we actually get into that, I just want to actually thank our important sponsors for the ability for us to put on the Rhode Island Startup to have on this list folks that we work with a lot. If you join us tomorrow, you'll see we've got IBM in a big way is helping to host our tech track, and lots going on tomorrow. So it's not to be missed if at all possible. And as we get started, I also wanted to thank the folks that are here with us today. You're going to hear from Dana Paul, who's the CEO of Ritual Motion, who said to me one time, and I will never forget it, we want to make Rhode Island known as the place for e-sporting, and I'm with him. Let's do it. And Willie's Super Brew, who used to be Farmer Willie's, and now it's Willie's Super Brew. And that's a wonderful story for Rhode Island. And then last but not least, we're actually here to also donate to the Rhode Island Community Food Bank. Let me tell you a little bit of story about that. As you can imagine, with what we're all going through right now, typically they would be serving around 53,000 families right now. It's now 68,000 per month. And unfortunately, they're basically needing to serve 30% more than ever, and they're getting 34% less donations. One of the problems is, as we've all been to the grocery stores, the shelves become empty sometimes. And sometimes what they end up getting are those things that people aren't buying, the dented cans, et cetera. That's not happening this year. Also, what they have to do now is purchase food. And so it's essential that we all that are able to give can actually donate to them so that they can buy food. Because as we know, more and more people now without jobs, without any support, economic support, and the Rhode Island Community Food Bank has become essential for their lives. So as we move forward today, we're going to talk about not only having some fun, but being able to donate to them, which we're all very excited about. So we're going to get started now, and I'm going to introduce the first person to kick us off with this Startup Weekend. I'm excited to invite Bill Cesare here, and the reason why is Bill is one of those people that you may or may not know him. He's one of these people in Rhode Island that has done so much and has really started many companies, and some have been real winners. And that's a real a feather in our cap for Rhode Island. And one of our jobs here at RIHub is to shine a light on entrepreneurs and startups that really the rest of Rhode Island maybe not have heard of, or maybe doesn't have the access to. So giving access is one of our most important pieces. So Bill is a serial entrepreneur. He's an investor. He's a mentor, and he likes to keep things simple with using his simple recipe for success, which is start plus fund plus build and then exit and repeat as much as possible. And he's been doing that for over 30 years. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to you, Bill, and I'm going to stop sharing. So that if you'd like, folks, you can go up to the view and go to the speaker's view, and you will see Bill. Take it away, Bill.
Great. Thank you, Annette, and hello, everybody. Looking around names, if you can, I've got my grid up so I can see few people I know, and I got names I recognize, but feel free to put the video on. Oh, great. I love it. Good. Listen, today I'm going to hopefully give a little bit of inspiration and also provoke some thoughts around where the future is headed as far as entrepreneurship. And I'm asked a lot in terms of whether or not I feel like entrepreneurs are born or bred, whether it's nature or nurture. I do think that it's sort of in your DNA in terms of being an entrepreneur. You've got to be a little bit of a risk taker, I think. It's not meaning to be reckless, but calculated risk is always good. You've got to sort of be comfortable being alone. And I'm not saying that's a loner, but you would likely find yourself in a situation with one or two co-founders, and it's kind of lonely as the boss. I always say the phone never rings with good news. So, and I'm sure, hopefully I can, maybe this also will commiserate with a lot of people as well. So it is, but you also need to enjoy, or at least be okay with organized chaos, because basically almost every day that's what it's all about, organized chaos. Some of us even find a lot of opportunity in chaos. In fact, we kind of embrace chaos. I'd probably fall into that category. And of course, you cannot be too timid about failing, because everybody has got to fail. In fact, when I talk to new entrepreneurs or people that come to me to ask for investment, I spend more time just talking about the journey. I just want to hear about their experience. I want to hear about their failures. I want to understand the scars. I want to just appreciate their motivation. And I often will talk about failing fast. So it's something that, again, I think is a learning experience and fundamental in terms of being an entrepreneur. I've been building companies for 30 years. I came to Rhode Island in 1984. I never had a job. I never had a paycheck. I never had a boss. I started my own companies and co-founded over 50 companies. And just last year, I've had 3 startups. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Most failed. Fortunately, though, I've had few 7-digit exits, a couple of 8s, a 9, and even a 10, which is pretty rare. So unicorn status, and I'll get to that a little bit later. One thing, though, that I wanted to also mention in terms of, and now I say people ask me what's an entrepreneur in terms of the DNA. But if I get in front of a classroom or if I get in front of an audience like this, I would often ask others, what do you think an entrepreneur is? And I get all kinds of answers, and oftentimes I'll hand out cards and have people write it down if I'm at Brown University or the entrepreneur, sort of club. And of all the time, only 1 or 2 people have ever gotten it right. There's a little cute story about it, but I'll spare you that. But to me, an entrepreneur is a storyteller. And what are they selling? Well, you're kind of selling information. And we, as entrepreneurs, whether you've got an online shop or a brick and mortar or a service company or a consulting firm, we often hear the phrase, how can I help you? But what we're really saying is, what can I sell you? And for me, as an entrepreneur as well, I like to kind of stay on a wave. I tried early on, and now I reflect back on crossing 5 decades of, what were the trends? What was the wave? And what I've kind of found is that it was all about the information. It was all about information. Back in the 80s, when I started, you needed to own the information. So when I was in high school and looking forward, honestly, and then college, I said, I need to get a lot of education. So I went through Boston College in 3 years. I went to BU, I got a master's degree. I went to BU Medical School and then jumped out of there when I couldn't stand sick people, and I got my PhD. And I was 25 years old, and I started. And I said, I own information. So now I'm going to start building companies. And I came to Rhode Island and I built rehab centers, cardiac rehab, pulmonary rehab, diabetic rehab, I owned a bike company. I owned a fitness company. I was also one of the only board certified ergonomists in the world. There's about 8,000 now. I was number 51. So as a board certified ergonomist, I started an entire company around that, selling information because I owned the information. And I started a company called Prevention Works. And if you look at Beacon Mutual Insurance Company, they bought my first company. And they still use Prevention Works. It was two guys in a desk at Beacon Mutual, if anyone knows Beacon. So they bought my knowledge, because at the time you needed to own the information. So that was the 80s. What happened in the 90s? Well, believe it or not, for anybody on this call, the internet wasn't always here. The internet was born in the 90s. So now what happened is, in terms of information, we could now find information. And when you can, different than owning the information, finding the information. And it wasn't that I was building companies only about finding information, but there was a theme going on in terms of I built companies that were data companies. I built a CRM company. I built a medical health record company called ER Card. I built a company called ACES Technologies, which took all of my know-how in rehabilitation and rehabilitation and medical and ergonomics. And we packaged that into one of the very first SaaS programs that we had installations from British Columbia to Australia. It was global. And that was in the 90s when, again, we had a transformational change, or sort of a seminal change, going from having to own the information to now being able to find information. So finding information was the internet allowed you to do that. So in the 90s, I built 3 or 4 companies, sort of not because of that theme, but it wasn't even apparent until really now in the 2000s, when it changed again from owning the information to finding the information to now being able to move the information. So now we're in 2000, the 3rd decade of my career, and now we can move information around and we can manage information. Well, what did I do there? And those platforms were born. B2B businesses were born. We had, I funded the first class, the entire class for Beta Spring, because again, we had a lot of opportunities going on there as far as emerging companies and emerging talent. Again, all around sort of moving information, moving and managing information. I also started a very unique, cutting edge digital ad platform called Digipop. And Digipop allowed a retailer to, and it sounds so simple now, to populate their homepage and their website with advertisements and ad placements. Simple now, right? I mean, probably off the shelf. But at the time, it was pretty amazing. And by the way, when I built the SaaS company, ACES Technology, in the 90s, there was not even encryption. There was no login. There was no such thing as a login. There was no such thing as a member account. All of that. So that was very early on. So we went from, I needed to own the information early on. Then I found that you had the ability to find information. That was in the 90s. The next decade brought the idea of moving the information, and I built several companies around that. And the next decade, 2010 to 2020, it was a very amazing period where you could create information and optimize information. I call it the maker generation. It was not me, everyone I think called it the maker generation. So we went from owning to finding to moving, now to creating. And in the creation phase, I started a company called Teespring. And that was, a bona fide unicorn. We grew from 0 to $1 million a day in revenue in 22 months. It was a meteor. It was, a phenom all around the maker community, all around the idea that you could create information now. I also started RIHub Capital within that period of time too, which is a royalty-based finance company. And that's just because, again, just feeding you in some of the sprinkling in the 50 companies. But more importantly, what I wanted to really emphasize is that we're going from owning information. I had to be really smart because I had to sell consulting and thing, and then I built the company. Then finding information, I built CRMs and I built platforms and I built other solutions. And then you could create information. And I built a company called Teespring, Digipop, IHS Digital. These were companies that were now directly serving B2B and B2C. So now you've got this next decade. I brought you through 4 decades or 5 decades pretty quickly here. So what's next? Well, right now, I believe we're in the sharing information segment. So this decade, it's all about sharing information, community. And to that end, I've built 4 companies. Some you're going to hear about today. I built actually with Dana, an esports company. You'll see tomorrow in the virtual conference, a company called Linerwand, which is a medical company. And then you'll probably see tomorrow also another company called Snack, which is a functional food company. More important than each individual company is a common theme that sort of runs through them, under them, over them, whatever you want to think about it. And that is community. Because all of those now companies that I'm building are, we are building community around it. That's how we're selling. So when I started out and I said, what? I'm sorry. When I started to say, how can I help you? And I said, well, it's more like, what can I sell you? Well, how are you going to sell? How do you accomplish that? But today we do it through community. We're taking a esports company and building a very large community called Ritual Motion. In a medical company called Linerwand, we're building a social community that actually for amputees. And in the snack company, we're building snackers and a lot of long form content, short form content, a lot of curation, and a high degree of social curation vis-a-vis Instagram and so forth. So we've gone now from owning to finding to moving to creating and finally sharing. And those themes really have presented themselves to me very clearly. And it wasn't necessarily that I was building a solution about how to move information or find information or own information. It was about the process of selling. How am I able to sell? What am I selling somebody? So what's next in terms of the future? I think we're at a very critical point here in terms of information. And I kind of will leave you this. I'm not even sure the time check. Annette, tell me what time is left.
You got another at least 10, 12 minutes. You're good.
All right, good. I think that we're at a critical juncture here in terms of keeping with this same theme of information, is that we want to make sure that we protect the ability to communicate. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to say in terms of the sharing, so testimonies and connectivity and all that is paramount. Dana will talk about authenticity and et cetera. I don't even steal his thunder but all these themes are paramount. But today I think we're at a critical juncture because we've got to really be careful of censorship. We've got to be careful. We've got to be able to protect information. We've got to be able to share information freely. We need to express each other's ideas freely. We certainly have to do it in a proper manner, in a cordial manner, and a kind manner. But I have a concern about information in the next segment of where information is going and how I can sell you information. So I just would leave you with that in terms of just being cognizant of how delicate of a point we are in history when I don't want to see information be hidden. So I had a few more notes, to talk about, but let me ask. Yeah, why don't you just ask some questions and
ask some questions, and I want to open it up. Anybody who has questions for Bill, this is a good time to go ahead and put them in chat. Bill, I have a question for you. When you think about, because you've done this many times where you've met a startup or an entrepreneur that's already going, and you decide that you want to invest in it. How do you make those decisions? What are you looking for? Is it the people? Is it your own personal interest in the idea? Yeah. Is it the market? What is it that you look at?
Well, I can guarantee you it's not the idea, and it's really not the product, and it's not the vertical, and it's not the segment at all. This is going to sound, very traditional or common for everyone. It's really the path to the market. It's understanding your audience very, 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 critically, understanding your audience. And that obviously encompasses quite a bit. But we always talk about path to market. I always talk about the wedge. What is you could say tip of the spear, or I call it the wedge. What is going to allow you to differentiate yourself, particularly in a competitive area, that will allow you the wedge? I like going sort of small first, penetrating with even a larger ecosystem, pick a spot, get in, and then start to grow. So of course, all the traditional stuff, you got your MVP. I could talk about risk and technology risk and market. Maybe that's market risk. But I key in on understanding your market. And this is why when I talk about the few companies that I've just started in these last few years, and by the way, maybe I should even just give a small carve out to post-pandemic carve out. Great. Because that really, fortunately, all the companies that I mentioned, the Line One, the esports, were all online. And it really allowed us to take advantage of that because, in fact, we had our audience clearly growing, almost artificially growing. For instance, the esports. I mean, more people are home and gaming and so forth. Similar with the others. So I was fortunate that I was in a sort of e-commerce, arena when that hit. But one thing that really did allow, we were just sort of discussing it the other day. And so I've got about 8 companies going right now, but I've got 3 startups, and we literally span about 12 different states, and we've never met each other. It'd be like this whole group right here. Say and it's oftentimes we'll do it. We've got, our esports company with almost 20 people. They've never met each other. We've got them from all over the country. And it's just been amazing. Frankly, it's been very efficient. I miss the boardroom, and I miss walking up and down the halls, and we talk about that. But from a efficiency standpoint, it's been awesome. And actually, no one's really everyone's on board. You don't have to convince someone we don't have an office for any of them. So, well, you've allowed us to come in, Annette. Thank you to CIC. So that was it. That was perfect.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, and I think one of the themes is with something so dramatic as what we're going through now as a world, it actually opens up the pathway to innovation in a way that we hadn't thought about. So we want to inspire folks to say, look, as bad as this is, this actually gives you a pathway to do something quite innovative and quite new and quite different, and do it in a different way. And you're absolutely right. It changes what it means in terms of place and geography.
Yeah, yeah. No, I really sympathize and feel bad for the brick and mortar and others that have, relying on foot traffic. That's kind of really where that hurts to think
Exactly.
that. I don't know, I know they've been scrambling and doing their best, but
Right.
that really is the people that we all should be thinking about to help, because they've just been dealt a real lousy
Absolutely.
hand.
Unbelievable. And by the way, I want to remind everybody, if you have a question, please feel free to put it here. Somebody asked about Teespring. Hey, T-shirt product branding platform. Is it Rhode Island? Was it Rhode Island born?
Oh yeah, it was Rhode Island born. Brown students. They came to me. We had a mushroom burger right across the street from my office, and they pitched the idea. I pointed to the building, third floor up, 2 stories over. I said, "You guys get there tomorrow." I said, "We'll build it because I love it." So I funded them before we got the check for lunch. And right, apparel, on-demand apparel, on-demand. So in other words, it was the very first sort of parlay. We're the fourth fund raising company, like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and there was one more, and then us. And we really parlayed the idea of sort of virtual inventory. So we were selling the product before it was made. And that's what impressed me with the entrepreneur who came to me that day. He said, "I sold T-shirts." I said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yeah, $4,000 worth." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, but I haven't made them yet." I said, "I'm in. Let's go." So, and that started.
Exactly. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story. Okay. Anybody else have anything else they'd like to ask?
Yeah. Hey, Bill. Hey, this is Murali. I mentioned to Annette that I was really excited to hear your story. You really, share your personal experience, how you started your life from Brown to where you are today. I was very impressed. I got to tell you that I'm ashamed to tell you that I was afraid to step into be an entrepreneur from, even though I had a degree like yours, and PhD in material science and, from McGill. But I became a slave to corporate America for the last 33 years. Okay, I had the opportunity to unlock that fear factor, because financially I'm good. I my daughter is all grown up, but I always want to wipe. Even when I had to come out after 33 years, I was afraid that what will happen to me in the next few years. Isn't it a fear factor prevents most of us to become an entrepreneur? And that's the one thing. I did find a huge advantage that I'm the boss. I don't have any boss to tell me what to do next. And also the freedom. I can run my imagination to the sky, And I started my own Plastic Innovations LLC. It's a consulting firm. Hopefully, it'll become huge things at some point. And I'm also an associate with Adler and Pollock and Sheehan, a law firm, as an intellectual property technology specialist.
Okay.
We're talking tomorrow, and he's the one told me about your Rhode Island group. I'm so excited to be here, and I really wanted to work with all your entrepreneurs and help me, show me the path. Because I'm new to all these things. Show me the path how I can make my creativity and my imagination to reality. So
yes, that's fabulous, Morelli. I actually that leads me to kind of say, hey, by the way, who's RIHub? What do we do? We're actually here for that reason. We were dreamed up originally by the governor, who wanted to create an innovation campus here in Rhode Island. In 2016, all of us citizens agreed, and we voted that, yes, we wanted an innovation campus. And RIHub happens to be the first. There are going to be several of them. And we actually are here to help people like yourselves that want to get into entrepreneurship or already doing something. We have RIHub's venture mentoring services as a core to what we do in terms of mentoring. Okay. We also offer onboarding into accelerators and programs like customer discovery, et cetera. So you came to the right place. That's what we do. And thank you for your question. There was somebody else who raised their hand down here. I want to make sure that everybody gets to ask their questions.
I had raised my hand.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you. Thank you for the talk, Bill. It was pretty insightful. I liked your approach. It wasn't necessarily like the problem solution fit when you talked about each company. It was more so like you picked a generation and its emphasis and changes with data. It was interesting and insightful. So my question is revolving around, you said you're a little fearful of the changes happening with data now, so maybe censorship and other things amongst that. Can you get a little more specific into it? So is it that like social media type censorship, or is it more like the expensiveness of data going forward? So for instance, like I know like Yahoo Finance, the APIs are they stopped being public and got really expensive. Is that what you're saying? Data is becoming more expensive and inaccessible, or like social media where they're not they're kind of censoring? I hope I'm understanding this correctly.
Yeah. So I think sorry, the sun's setting where I am, so I'm getting darker and darker. Wow. I'll go into the abyss. No, I think I'm trying to apply some topical, global, community sort of sentiment that's out there, or observation in terms of what we're all hearing in the news, et cetera. I just have a fear for it because, again, as the next sort of segment, if I ever get this talk to do in 10 years from now, and I said, oh boy, what happened in that decade, that 2020 decade? Remember, we couldn't get information, or people were hiding information, or blocking information, or censoring my information, because that's not healthy. That's not, and because that will affect how we sell. So as entrepreneurs, how may I help you? No, what can I sell you? And you're selling information. But if the information starts to get difficult to trust, or it gets difficult to access, then I think we've got to, I'm just speaking just almost sort of, professorially, not or academically versus anecdotally, because I haven't gone through it. Let's see what happens this night in 2020 to 2030. I'm a advocate and a steward of information, I guess, if you will, and I base this discussion on it because, in looking back, that's sort of been the most profound, I guess, way that I can relate my journey. And so, Chris, it's more I'm not prognosticating. I'm sort of just I'm concerned, and I hope, because you could see that if information was scarce or hidden or or jeopardized or moved or manipulated, or then it's not real information anymore.
Right.
And then I've got to change my entire way that I've got to sell to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Information wants to be free.
Sort of like open source stuff like Python and things like that. It's that we can leverage those free foundational tools to all kind of progress. So
well, if I wanted to subjectively say to you right now, all of your banking is dangerous. Get your money out. There's no safe haven. Go buy gold right now. Buy gold and silver. Get everything. And if there was no counter to that, I'm just giving you an example, and you only got one side of information, then it would be very difficult to start to compete. It'd be very difficult when I say I sell you, what story am I going to tell you? If you believe only one thing, there's nothing for me to try to convince you of. Versus in a free enterprise, I need to do my best to convince you, given all that you know, that the story I tell you will convince you that I'm better, or that you should trust me, or that you should you should conduct a certain behavior. But if that's gone, then I've got no foundation to leverage on. The competition goes away as well.
Well, that's great. I mean, we're going to actually wrap up here a little bit, but I will also say the manipulation of data and the reality of what we actually are experiencing as data has really changed dramatically. Whether or not it's actually the person we're seeing on the video or listening to or hearing, or reading, all of that stuff has become very potentially manipulated, and that's also, you know, an issue. So data is changing. I think that's important to understand, and we have to be thinking about what that looks like in the future. But Bill, we can't thank you enough. We hope you join us for tomorrow. We're going to pull some of this into our ending commentary tomorrow around the 2:30 timeframe. We love what you're talking about, and again, thank you for kicking us off. We will continue to follow all of your successes and even the failures too. So we all have them, every one of us who does this.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again.